Welcome to Oh My Menses, a digital space dedicated to all things menstruality, periods, hormones, and cycle-informed living. Join me, Corinda, naturopath and fertility educator, as we explore topics that we probably don't hear about enough. From stories of menarche, birth control, and common period problems to menstrual shame, sex, fertility, and the moon, if it's about the human female experience, I probably talk about it. This is a place of sharing, remembering, learning, and unlearning, where we come together and reclaim our cyclical power. So sit back, relax, let's all connect with our wombs, and remember our brilliant cyclical nature. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Oh My Menses. I know it's been a while. Shout out to my inconsistent nature. We're working on it. It's always a work in progress. How are you? Less about me. How are you? What cycle day are you on? What phase of your cycle are you in? Back to me. I am, because I can't hear your reply, but you can message me on Instagram. Anything about your cycle anytime you want, quite frankly. I am on cycle day 9. I am in my follicular phase. It has been a slow come up into my follicular spring energy for me this cycle. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that on a different episode of the podcast. But today I am feeling a bit more jazzed for the first time this cycle. I can feel my energy lifting a bit. I have spent a lot of time in the sun, spent time with the sunset and just like laying on the grass last night. I did morning yoga and sun salutations in the bright, bright sun this morning, and then decided to take myself and Laika to the beach, which was absolutely beautiful. And I feel like I got some legitimate medicine from that. And sometimes nature just has the answers and the medicine that we're seeking. And you know what? I'm actually gonna, right now in real time, write that down as a podcast episode. Nature as medicine, because I had some thoughts that I want to talk about in regards to nature sometimes being all that we need. But for today's episode, it's still February. So I'm recording this on the 20th of February. And I don't know about you, but in my world, if it's February, it's still like technically the new year. I'm also going to say shout out to me and shout out to you if you have felt a really slowly emerging new year energy this year. You know how sometimes like the first week of January you feel like pumped up, ready to go. It feels like this collective like let's go, let's get them energy. Myself and a few people that I know like took a whole month to finally feel like, oh, okay, I've got some of this like upward new year momentum behind me. And I really like also shout out to us that we weren't like shaming ourselves for not feeling that New Year's energy. I hope you didn't shame yourself if you did not feel up to things in January. If you felt flat or unmotivated, I hope you accepted where you were at with compassion and love and celebrating wherever you're at now. And yeah, certainly for me, I felt a New Year surge of energy later in Feb. So it took me a bit, took some other people a bit. So with that said, I'm recording this in February. It's still the new year in my head. And so today's episode is all about hormone health ins for 2024. I've seen it on the gram. I've seen it in other places on the internet. What's in for 2024? What's out for 2024? You know, I've just seen a lot of posts like that. And I'm like, what's in for hormonal health in 2024, Corinda? And there's probably a lot of things that are in for hormonal health. There's probably a lot more things that are out, which is going to be a whole other episode or at least a good few reels that you can catch on Instagram. But I just want to go through some things that I want to pop on your radar when you are considering your hormonal health, your cyclical health. And when I'm talking about hormonal health, cyclical health, I'm talking about your menstrual cycles, how you experience your periods and your monthly bleeds, how you experience the cycle in between each period, which is a big thing that exists. It's, reproductive health is a lot more than just our periods and fertility. There's a lot more in between. But also how you're feeling generally in your female body. Are you waking up with energy? Do you have energy and vitality to face the day? Do you feel like you're thriving? Or do you feel like you are constantly depleting yourself or really easily drained, real easily exhausted? All of these, whether you're feeling that good or that bad, hormones come into it. Hormones come into how you feel on a day-to-day basis. It's not just about fertility. It's not just about whether you have good or bad periods. So I think a general health for 2024 is prioritizing your hormone health. If it's not something that you've already been doing, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to hazard a guess that you do care about your hormone health. And if so, thank you for caring about your hormones and thank you for listening. So I've got 5 or 6 things that I want to go through. Let's get stuck in. Something that has been strong on my radar probably since 2024. Well, it's always on my radar, but it got even more solid on my radar this year. And it's your circadian rhythm. This is your sleep-wake cycle. This is your daily rhythm. This is how your body functions as a human in response to light and in response to dark. And the more I learn about the circadian rhythm, the more I understand how much it impacts so many aspects of our health. It has such a broad, far-reaching impact. And because of that, I find that it is just one of the foundational things that is needed to set our hormonal rhythms straight. So if we want to get our monthly rhythm really nice, optimal, thriving, we need to get our daily rhythm right. And in this current world, it's no one really appreciates this natural daily rhythm. We're not waking up with the sun. We're not waking up at sunrise when the sun comes out. We're usually not getting natural sunlight in our eyes the first thing in the morning. We can spend a lot of our day indoors exposed to artificial light, fluorescent lighting. And then come nighttime, as the sun goes down, we're not exposing ourselves often to sunset light as a norm. I'm speaking in a very general cultural sense. And so we're not getting exposure to the sunset light. And then the sun goes down and then we're indoors with our artificial lights on, with screens in front of our faces, usually no barrier between us and those screens. And the big thing with artificial light is that I'm telling myself now that I'm not going to go too much into the nitty-gritty language, because I really want you to, I really want this to be able to be easily absorbed into your being and into your understanding. And I'm also not going to put that pressure on myself to, be really scientific about it. But in a lot of artificial light, there's a high proportion of blue light. So with most light that we're exposed to, it will have a proportion of all the colors of the rainbow. Artificial light has a lot of blue light. That blue light, when it comes through our eyes, interacts with a part of our brain and directly alters our production of a really important hormone called melatonin. This is your master sleep hormone, but it does so much more than that. It's also a really important antioxidant. It's really important for controlling these genes that you have in different organs of your body, in different parts of your body, that literally help your cells and help your organs function like in a clock-like rhythm, in accordance to when it's light out and when it's dark out. And so when we're exposed to a lot of blue light, especially at night after the sun's gone down, we are disrupting how all those genes are functioning. So things can start to go awry on multiple levels of our health, in multiple parts of our body. And we're suppressing this melatonin. So we're not getting sleepy when we should be getting sleepy. And we're essentially bypassing our body's natural cue to go to bed and to get a decent amount of rest. Now, circadian rhythm's important. A really big runoff factor of having a good circadian rhythm is having a really good sleep cycle, having really good sleep hygiene. That is going to be at the top of the list of things that are going to impact your hormone health, and whether you are you experiencing active period problems, painful periods, heavy periods, irregular periods, especially if you've got something like polycystic ovarian syndrome, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance. If you're trying for a baby, you're trying to conceive, getting your sleep right is going to have an incredible runoff effect. And it breaks my heart that so many of us just aren't prioritizing sleep. But it's so weird because we all know it's important. I don't think I've spoken to a person who doesn't know that sleep is really, really important. They might not know all the ins and outs of why, but sometimes our habits and what we're used to gets the better of us. And if we've got this habit of staying up late, pushing past our body's first cue of tiredness, which will usually kick in before 10:30, and I'm pulling that in from an Ayurvedic and a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, it can be harder to fall asleep if we stay up past 10:30, 11 at the latest. We will usually get a cue, a sleep cue, a cue for tiredness, a cue that is telling us to go to bed before 10:30 p.m. And you might think, no, I don't. No, I'm a night owl. I stay up. A lot of the issue with night owlism is that we've just gotten really, really good at ignoring, bypassing, or suppressing our cues for tiredness. And whether we're using stimulants in the day like caffeine, whether we're, back to the light exposure thing, whether we're exposed to a huge amount of blue light at night and during the day and disrupting our whole circadian rhythm. So all those things make it harder for us to tune into our bodies and go, oh yeah, I am ready for bed. And I also want to address, in regards to staying up late, as well as it being a habit thing, I just also want to address, I guess, a mental health aspect of going to bed. I don't even know if I have the words for this, but I'll try my best. I think you'll pick up very easily what I'm putting down. But there's something that feels so closely connected when it comes to mental health and sleep. In that bedtime, nighttime, I feel carry this real triggery energy for a lot of our mental health concerns and potentially for some emotions that we don't want to face. Especially if you sleep by yourself, or maybe you spend the day at work socializing with coworkers, or you spend time with friends during the day or after work. Sometimes going home and it's nighttime and then it's close to bedtime can be a little bit of a trigger of oh, we don't have these, our lives aren't filled at the moment with other noise and interacting with other people's energy. That's all that's left to deal with is you, yourself, and your own energy that you're bringing. And sometimes we can use being busy and being really socially active as a coping mechanism to not focus on our own shit. And dang, this is a real side tangent. So I just want to shout out to you. If you get what I'm saying, I just want to shout out to you. If you struggle with going to bed, because it can be a really activating time for you. Maybe it brings up some anxiety. Maybe it brings up feelings of loneliness or depression or frustration. Maybe that's when your brain decides okay, it's time to process everything that we did today and in the last 5 years. Go. My heart is with you, and you are absolutely not alone in that. But again, just because something is common, it does not mean that it is normal. Just because something is common or a habit, it does not mean that it's going to be the path to you living your best life. And more often than not, these habits and these patterns can be helping us self-sabotage, against ourselves. They can be cock-blocking our progress when it comes to what we want to see in our lives, transforming in our health, in our bodies, So I just want to put that out there. And perhaps if that feels relevant for you, perhaps it's a good idea to focus on a really nourishing mental health plan, a support plan that is just focused for nighttime and bedtime. And like, what do we do when all the things are gone, when all the friends are gone, when our work for the day is done and there is nothing left but ourselves to deal with? How are we going to tend to our soul? Just want to pop that out there. As a side note to that, it can also be a thing if you experience a chronic freeze response during the day, if you procrastinate a lot during the day. Sometimes it can get to bedtime and there's a feeling of shame or guilt that arises, and it can send you into this flurry of like, I got to do all these things before bed. Oh my God, I'm such a piece of shit. I didn't do this today like I had planned. Look, my to-do list, anything's barely checked off my to-do list. Oh my God, I've got to stay up and like make up for it. And you're trying to squeeze all these projects and checked boxes in before you go to bed. And even just saying that breaks my heart, because I've absolutely been there, and I absolutely know people who are there, and this is a really common thing, I feel. And I'm gonna say, especially with women, we are go-getters. We want to tick all the boxes. We want to do all the things. We want to feel really productive because we've been sold this idea that if we are productive, we are worthy. And maybe if we're worthy, if we're productive enough, then we're worthy enough. And if we're worthy enough, then maybe we stop feeling like shit all the time and we just get all the things we want, right? But we're tying our worth to this external thing that is literally just an idea. Like productivity and even just working, it is just an idea that some people made up a time long, long ago. And let me tell you, your intrinsic inherent worth is 100% based on the fact that you are alive and here and listening to this. And I'm getting very handsy at the screen right now, although this isn't a video recording. I'm getting very wog with the screen. You are inherently worthy because you are here. There is nothing that you can do externally. There is nothing that can happen to you externally that is going to increase your worth or decrease your worth, because your worth just is. It is innate. It is there. And there's no questions asked on that as far as I'm concerned. No questions. It just is. And so that procrastination stuff, that procrastination rebound stuff at nighttime, put it down. If you are frozen during the day, your nervous system is already activated in a very specific way. And you should not sacrifice your sleep and your health just because you didn't do the things that you expected yourself to do that day. Your sleep, your health, your vitality, your rest, your deep rest is so much more important than any to-do list, than anything that you could or couldn't get done in a day. And again, that is not a quick fix. That is the journey to unraveling and alchemizing that, if that's something that resonates with you, is a big journey. It requires a lot of nervous system attention and work, and going through your limiting beliefs and rewriting beliefs, understanding your stories, where these ideas, where these expectations, where this pressure came from. But as a first step, I'm just going to invite you, if that's something you find yourself doing at night when it's bedtime and you're like, oh my God, no, but I got to do this. I just invite you to say, no, I don't. I actually don't have to do that. And just try that on. Even asking yourself if you feel shameful about it. Just asking yourself, is this my shame? Is this shame real? Or is this just an emotional pattern that's coming up from a story, a made-up story that I've told myself over and over and over again? And I actually don't need to carry this anymore. And again, big journey, but just some first step invitations for you to have a play with. That was a whole side tangent that I'm absolutely not going to edit because I think it's really, really valuable and I trust what comes out of my mouth. If it wants to come out of my mouth, I trust it. It's coming out for a reason. So back to the broader idea of supporting your circadian rhythm. Light is a big part of this. So if we're sort of going from morning to night, in the morning, it's really important that the first light that hits your face, that hits your eyes, is that of natural sunlight. As early as possible is like best case scenario, but whenever you realistically can wake up and get some sunlight on your face is what's going to work best for you. So before you reach for a screen or, and whether that's a phone or a TV or an iPad or a laptop, before you have that artificial light shining in your face, go outside and get some natural sunlight with no sunglasses on, as natural and direct as you can. Obviously, don't stare into the sun. I feel like sometimes I can say things and I'm like, did that need a disclaimer? So I'm just going to pop that there. No directly staring into the sun, but letting natural sunlight come into your face. Even if you can't see the sun rising, like wherever you live, if you don't have a view of the horizon, because I think most of us don't, that's okay. If there is light outside at all, your body and your eyes will sense that light and it will have the beneficial impact. During the day, now, depending on your work situation, if you are able to fashion your day-to-day work setup in a way where you are sitting in front of a window where you can be exposed to the changing light of the day, that is fabulous. If you are in a very, very indoor office setting where there isn't a lot of natural light, or there's a excess amount of ceiling fluorescent lights or just lots of artificial light lighting up your workspace, my invitation there would be to check out some blue light blocking glasses. I'll link them down below, with the yellow lenses. So these are great for daytime use where we don't want to be blocking out all blue light, but if we're not getting natural cues from sunlight and we're just getting a lot of artificial light from screens, it can be a really nice buffer in between. If there's a point around midday or somewhere in the afternoon, like your lunch break, if you can get outside, go for a little walk around the block or walk to get your food, walk somewhere nice in nature to eat your meal, that would be really ideal. Whether you have natural sunlight from windows or whether you're in a really indoor artificial environment. Either way, taking a nature break some point in the afternoon is really good. And then when it gets into the evening, if you really want to amp it up, you can sort of do the 3 levels of blue light blocking glasses where you wear the yellow lenses in the day, amber ones sort of closer in the evening around sunset, and then the red lenses after sunset. But again, that's doing things on a real perfect level, and you don't have to aim for perfection at all. Do what works best for you. In any case, I'll link them all down below. So it gets closer to sunset. If you have your amber blue light blocking glasses, you might pop them on. And then as the sun disappears, as it actually starts to get darker, being really mindful of what artificial lighting you have in your house. I, for one, when I was living in an environment that I could control a bit more, living with family now, I don't have as much flexibility. But I did buy red globes and amber globes, and that was our evening light. When it got close to sunset, and certainly when it got dark out, our house was amber and red in color. And at nighttime, that is how it should be. There should be as little blue light from artificial sources as possible. Candlelight's really good. And even lamps, like if you've got in like ceiling downlights, especially if they're white in tone, I would aim to just like avoid using those at night at all. Of course, unless on special occasions. Avoid using those and opt for yellow toned, warm toned lamps for the evening time. Ideally, the darker that it gets, the closer to bedtime that it gets, the more lights should be going down. Salt lamps are great. Candlelight is great if that's something that is realistic for you. And when it's dark out, red lensed blue light blocking glasses on, chef's kiss, fabulous. Especially if you do have a job or obligations at night where you do need to be using a screen. I also highly recommend a software called Flux that you can put on your laptop, and I think most other devices. Again, I'll link it down below. You can suss it out for the devices that you have. Highly recommend Flux. I have mine set up on my laptop in a way that it knows the time, it knows when the sun is rising and when the sun is setting, and it changes the tone of the light coming from my screen based on how close we are to sunset. So as the day goes on, it gets yellower and yellower and yellower. Although to me, it's a great start, but to me it's not enough. So I will still use my red lens glasses to help block that excess blue light. There's also a little hack that you can do on an iPhone, well, both on Android and iPhone, but I have an iPhone, so it's just fresher in my head. There's a little thing that you can do with the accessibility settings where you can press your lock button 3 times and it makes the screen go red. So like no blue light is being emitted from the screen. It looks really weird, but I'm so used to it now at bedtime, and it's a little party trick of mine. I'm like, hey, you should do this. And people are like, that's weird, but maybe I'll try it. And shout out to you if you've tried it. I'll also pop the link. So you need to set that up in settings. So I'll pop the link of a little instructional video on how to do that below. And I'll send some links for how you can set that up on Android or apps that you can, I think there's an app that you can download for Android phones and that can help make the screen red too. And then like most ideally, an hour before bed, if we can be doing no screens at all 1 hour before you put your head on your pillow and you're like, okay, I'm ready to fall asleep now, that would be best case scenario. That would be absolutely brilliant. I'm also really aware that we're like super attached to our screens and it can be easier said than done. And my invitation there is to just start exploring what you would be doing, what you could be doing if your phone or TV wasn't occupying your attention as much as it is now, especially when it comes to nighttime. Would you be reading more? Would you be like learning more, reading non-fiction books? Would you be letting your imagination flow and enjoying like a fiction book? Would you be crafting something? Would you be knitting or sewing? Would you spend the last hour of your day painting, working on an artsy project that you can do by low light? Maybe getting around to working on a hobby that really lights you up, that nourishes you, and you can get that little, that nourishing dopamine in just before the end of the day. What would you be doing? It could be meditating. It could be some really nice yin yoga, fascial maneuvers, a fascial like stretching routine. It could be some somatic nervous system regulation techniques. A bath by candlelight. Oh, whoa. A self-massage with some really nice lotion or body oil. A self-touch practice that you want to engage with. There are so many things So many beautifully nourishing things that we could be doing before bed rather than spending our last moments before we enter the dream space with screens in front of our face. And this is something that I'm really challenging myself on lately. And so I extend that invitation to you as well, to just have a play around with what would you be doing in the last hour of your day if screens occupied less of your attention? If screens didn't exist, what would you be doing? So get your circadian rhythm right in for hormone health in 2024. What else is in for 2024 when it comes to looking after your hormones, because they're the real MVP? Just a quick one, sorting out your hydration. Similar to sleep, I feel like drinking enough water is just something that gets ridiculously overlooked. We all know it's good for us. We all know it's important, but we have our objections to why we're not drinking enough. We can't find the right bottle. We don't like the taste of water. We might consume more coffee or tea or sugary drinks, sugary soft drinks, and now our body has adapted to prefer those because they've got such a high, because it's such a high sugar taste. Obviously, it's so stimulating and activating for our human bodies that really get a kick out of sugar that we can just go off plain water, because when you put plain water next to something that gives you a bit of a stimulant kick with a little bit of caffeine, maybe a little bit of a carbon pop with the bubblies, plus the hit of sugar or a sweet taste, it's almost like you can't even compare them. But the major difference being is that one is absolutely detrimental for health and the other is absolutely necessary for health. Now, along with the circadian rhythm becoming stronger on my radar in the recent months, water is also something that is more fresh on my radar, specifically because I did a masterclass courtesy of Carrie B Wellness. I think her name is Carrie Bennett. She's a functional medicine practitioner in North America, and she did this amazing masterclass that was all about the mitochondria and the importance of electrons and the importance of water, but like the specifics of water and how our cells use water. And it blew my mind just a little bit. I might even pop that in the show notes below. It does get quite sciencey. It's going like deep into quantum biology, the biochemistry of your cells, but it just feels like crucially important stuff. And anyway, one of the concepts that was brought up in that masterclass was this concept of structured water. Now, I'm actually going to type that into Google now because I don't want to butcher the definition for you. And because this is a newer concept for me, I feel like I could butcher the definition if I just tried to totally go off the top of my head. So, structured water, to start explaining it, and to give some context, you may have heard of water experiments done by one Dr. Emoto, where he essentially looked at different sources of water under a microscope and noticed that they would have different structures. The molecules of water would look different depending on where they came from. And then he did some experiments on collecting water from the same source and then talking to that water, to each collection of water differently. And I know this is going to sound really far out there. It's allowed to sound really far out there. And the water that he spoke loving words to has this gorgeous snowflake-like structure. And then water, the collections of water that he spoke negatively to, where he thought disgusting thoughts about or where he projected hate towards, has a totally different makeup. Each container is water, but something about the vibrational frequency of love versus fear, love versus hate, changed the structure of the water. And when you start talking about quantum biology in the context of a human and how specific things get at the cellular level, there is no doubt in my mind that the molecular structure of water is going to have an impact on how that water behaves in our body. I don't believe all water is equal. I do believe there are big detrimental impacts from having water that is in plastic bottle, having water that is overly processed, and even overly filtered. I believe there are detrimental impacts from having too much water that has added synthetic fluoride to it that isn't sourced from a natural spring. I have some complex thoughts about water. So after explaining that experiment, let me go back to the definition of structured water. This is from Healthline, so they're probably going to have a fairly skeptical take to this. Structured water, sometimes called magnetized or hexagonal water, refers to water with a structure that has supposedly been altered to form a hexagonal cluster. Proponents claim structured water shares similarities with water that hasn't been polluted or contaminated by human processes. They believe these qualities make it healthier than tap or filtered water. According to structured water proponents, this type of water exists naturally in mountain springs, glacier melt, and other untouched sources. There are also proponents, this is me talking now, not reading off a screen. There are also proponents of structured water who believe that water can change structure. I guess as Dr. Emoto showed with his water experiments. So exposing water to ultraviolet sunlight or infrared light can supposedly change the molecular structure of water into this structured hexagonal form. Using gemstones, some people also claim that it improves the quality of water by changing that structure again. And one of the things that I got specifically out of the masterclass is that keeping water near man-made electromagnetic fields can really mess around with the structure of water. And again, this is like the far end of optimizing water intake. So bear with me. These are not the basics. I have just pulled you into the riptide with me. Just bear with me. We'll get back to shore soon. So because different kinds of water, when we're looking at it at this close of a level, can have different impact on our human body, I think it's really important, at the very least interesting and curious, to start experimenting with our water in this way, using glass bottles, steel bottles instead of plastic bottles, letting our water bathe in sunlight before we drink it potentially, trying to keep, if we use a ceramic filter or something like that, trying to keep that away from power points or any electronics that we have in our house that could be emitting a high level of high frequency of EMFs. Just some things to play around with on that, again, that far end of the spectrum. In terms of the basics, it's hard to say everyone should be drinking X amount of water because we all have different makeups, we all have different levels of activity, we have different body sizes, structures. So I don't believe there's like a golden amount of water that we should be drinking. But speaking of golden, you can use the color of your urine to assess how much more water you need or don't need. Urine ideally should be a very, very slightly pale yellow, just a slight yellow tinge to it, or clear. Once your urine gets to that level, you are sufficiently hydrated with the amount of water that you're drinking. Keep it up. Good job, keep it up. You may need to increase that water intake if your activity level changes. Days that you're more active, naturally, you're going to need more water and electrolytes. If your urine is very, very yellow or quite dark, quite pungent, more on that brown or orange, really dark side, that's time to up your water intake. And just experiment with having an extra 500 ml, noticing how that's changing the output of your urine and going from there. Get really like intuitive and experimental with it. There's no hard and fast rules. This is my preferred method when it comes to like tapping into my body. And this is a way, one of the ways that I like to encourage people to connect with their own bodies is not to just drop all the rules for a second and just look at what your body's doing, tweak some things slightly and see how that changes what your body's doing. So urine color, an amount and water intake is a great way to experiment with that little concept. On the flip side, if your urine is always clear and copious, like you're going to the toilet a lot and it's just really, really clear and quite a strong flow, you might be having too much water. You also, and it might not be you're having too much water full stop, it might be that you're having too much water without sufficient mineral and electrolyte content. So you might want to experiment with having a little bit more coconut water, maybe taking some plain, like unsweetened, unflavored, uncolored electrolytes, natural electrolytes, adding some salt to your water, seeing how that changes things up, and then seeing how that affects your general energy and vitality. And do you feel like you're carrying more or less fluid? Do you feel less fluidy in your face, in your joints, in your ankles, in your belly? And how does that change your thirst signals? Because that's something that can also get super disrupted, where people are like, I don't feel thirsty, so I don't drink water. Speaking of which, I'm getting thirsty and I don't have my bottle next to me, so be right back. Water has been drunk and I invite you to do the same. That's also one of my low-key rules. If someone mentions water or if someone near me takes a drink, I'm like, might be a good time to have a drink. Also, hydrating yourself first thing in the morning can be a total game changer. This is also something loosely from traditional Chinese medicine. Having warm water, I forget the specific amount, but again, get intuitive with it, but a decent amount. A part of my brain is saying 16 ounces, which is a lot. I have it in a big mason jar. Having warm water first thing in the morning can be hydrating, but also very, very cleansing, especially if you put a little bit of lemon juice in it or a little bit of apple cider vinegar. And can just be a really great way to start your day. Pair it with your circadian rhythm, your new circadian rhythm habits to have a nice big warm glass of water in the morning. Also, while I'm talking about the temperature of water, yes, I generally don't recommend always having cold, icy or refrigerated water, just because it can be a little bit more work for your body. Your body has to warm that water up to a temperature where it can be biologically useful. Your internal body temperature is not that of a fridge or a freezer, and it can pull away from your digestive fire. So especially if you experience chronic digestive issues, if you're having a lot of cold or icy drinks, I would invite you to change to room temp or warm water and see how that changes things on the regular. They're my thoughts about water. I have more to say. I have a few more points to go through, and you know what? I'm going to do a part 2 so I don't drag this out too long. So I hope you enjoyed these tips. We did a deep dive on the circadian rhythm and the importance of your sleep-wake cycle, the importance of your exposure to light and dark, and we covered some really nuanced aspects of hydration. Hopefully I didn't go too off the rails there. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about prioritizing meal times and welcoming food. I'm going to talk about ditching cycle shoulds. I'll talk a little bit more about what those actually are. And I'm also going to switch things up a bit and talk about limiting beliefs when it comes to our hormones and our health. So that's all for this episode. I'll catch you in part 2, and I hope you can find even just one little thing that you can apply today or tomorrow and go, you know what, Corinna mentions this thing. It kind of sounded exciting when I heard her say it. Let's see if I can try that. I believe in you. Give it a go. Catch you in the next one. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Oh My Menses. If you have a special request of something you'd like to hear me talk about, or you have any questions that you want to ask me, please drop me a line at hello@corindaholistics.com.au. I would like to acknowledge the land and country on which I live, work and create, that of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I honour their connection to land, sea, flora and fauna across this country. I pay my respects to the elders of these communities, past, present and forthcoming.